how you fall on Dwayne Casey, who didn't even win 60 games, basically did it like the big argument for Dwayne Casey winning Coach of the Year is he sucked less than he did before. He's literally being graded against himself. Like, oh, well, he really changed how he coached. Yeah, that's what you do. You change or you lose. Like, there's not. He stopped being shitty. Like, oh, congratulations, man, you really did it. And guess what? They were still shitty in the playoffs. I cannot it's outrageous. Brad Stevens. Like the vindication is right there when you realize how far Brad Stevens went. People want to say, have it both ways and say the Celtics aren't talented, Celtics aren't good, they're not good enough to win anything or go anywhere. But the second anyone says anything about Brad Stevens, it comes back the other way, where everyone all of a sudden is like, no, it's actually, he's got some great draft picks. Like, we all knew Terry Rozier was great. Terry Rozier is actually the best point guard ever. And Marcus Smart, who we've all dumped on for being literally one of the worst shooters forever, is the greatest player of all time. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are good, but Brad Stevens developed them. That didn't happen out of nowhere. I don't know if those guys probably don't develop under any other coach. All right, ran over.
No, with that,
he's Detroit. He's in Detroit.
That, welcome inside this edition of Celtics Roundtable here on CLNS Media, the leading online provider of Brad Stevens fans and the Boston Celtics. Evan Valenti alongside Sam Sheehan, Jonathan Ignall, Matt Ignall producing this show. Today's show is brought to you in part by Hims. Go to Hims or go to forhims.com right now. Use our promo code CLNS for a special trial month of Hims for just $5. We're coming at you the day after Brad Stevens lost Coach of the Year to Dwayne Casey, former coach of the Raptors, current coach now of the Detroit Pistons. We're all sort of varying levels of mad about this. Sheehan probably the maddest about it, so I let him just kind of take the show by the reins and lead it. But yeah, Brad Stevens does not win Coach of the Year. Look, these awards really, I think Brad cares, but I think Brad is also very smart to be no, this is not a big deal. I'd rather win an NBA title than to win Coach of the Year, because he's smart, understands that making the players happy is really what this is all about. But that being said, Brad Stevens finished second. His team finished second in the NBA behind Toronto, granted, but did so without his second best player. That guy broke, shattered, and made his ankle go in a different direction 5 minutes into the season. Kyrie, his best player, was spotty throughout the season, towards the end of the season, then was put on ice for the rest of the year. And didn't have a single player. Had one. I guess Kyrie still counts. Had one player in the top 50 in terms of minutes played throughout the entire NBA. So Brad Stevens won the second most games in the Eastern Conference without his second best player, without his his actual best player playing in a lot of games, and had no players on the all-defensive team, correct? And still was able to have the best defense in the league. There are so many things you can attribute to Brad Stevens, Jonathan, that it is just quite frankly kind of ridiculous that Brad Stevens is not hoisting the trophy after last night, but here we are.
Yeah, Sam's right. This is a pity award. Dwayne Casey winning Coach of the Year really epitomizes the participation award trophy for me. A dude who can't coach wins Coach of the Year over Brad Stevens, who coached a team destroyed by injuries to the second seed. Sam, you were talking that he might win Most Improved Coach, Dwayne Casey, because he was so bad. This is a year where Alvin Gentry and Nate McMillan existed. So I think he's the third place vote getter in that. These awards are so stupid. It's not even the season award. It's the regular season award. The postseason is where you actually see these guys get exploited, like Brett Brown not calling a timeout or Dwayne Casey literally letting the Cleveland Cavs stomp him out of the playoffs. I care just about as little as Brad Stevens. But
we say that this stuff doesn't matter, but then it ends up being the talking points, when Hall of Fame things and things that actually are important later on down the line come up. How many if Brad Stevens doesn't win Coach of the Year this year, what is he going to have to do in the future? Because we say postseason success doesn't matter. The East is going to be in shambles unless there's a massive transfer of power. If LeBron actually goes to LA, the East is going to be in shambles. So the Celtics could win 67 games and no one would care because they would just say that the East is easy. There's not going to be Brad Stevens stands a real chance of not winning Coach of the Year for an extended period of time. And I think, it'd be a huge, I think it's going to end up being a not testament to who he was as a coach historically when people look back at him and it's oh, this guy only won 3 Coach of the Year awards. And they're going to say that Danny Ainge was the primary architect of the Boston Celtics, which I don't know if we have, some of these picks. Like, I'm not sure we have the Memphis pick if Brad Stevens doesn't cast necromancy on the bones of Jeff Green and, get Memphis to bite on that pick. I'm not sure, we have some of these, other picks without Brad Stevens, kind of transforming these guys into assets. Like Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder became big centerpieces in the Kyrie Irving deal. You definitely don't get Kyrie Irving for just one draft pick if you're not if Brad Stevens doesn't make Isaiah Thomas an all-NBA player and Jay Crowder one of the better wings in the NBA. Those guys worked hard. They're still really talented players, but I think there is something to be said for just a track record across the board of Celtics players coming in, improving wildly, leaving, and returning to the levels they were at. That's not like a coincidence.
I mean, and don't forget Evan Turner, who he owes that contract to, $70 million,
yes.
Thanks to Mr. Brad Stevens.
Yeah, Brad Stevens ruined the Trailblazers by proxy, which is pretty cool.
They didn't make him sign Azalea and Allen Crabbe.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, what's funny is, like, with this award, if you go by the wins thing, Dwayne Casey had this many wins, the most in the Eastern Conference. So Mike D'Antoni didn't even get invited to the party. He won last year for Coach of the Year, which I give him a lot of credit for. He won the most games in the NBA of any head coach this season, implemented a 2-point guard system with Chris Paul and James Harden, which was, primarily part of what D'Antoni runs anyway. But to do it with Chris Paul and James Harden is difficult to do. To win as many games as they did, that's, I think, equally as impressive what Dwayne Casey did, which was we're going to shoot more three-pointers this year. Like, that was really the big thing. And he played his bench a lot. Like, that's the one thing, if you want to give Casey a lot of credit, is he was one of the few guys in the NBA through the regular season that was very willing to let his second unit run stuff in the fourth quarter and finish games. If that's the one thing, if I take one thing out of this year, if I'm going to give Dwayne Casey a lot of credit for one thing, it's building that bench. And that bench didn't show up in the playoffs, but in the regular season, that was a big reason why they won so many games.